Greetings, I'm Demonac. It's been a couple of days since I've seen Star Wars, and here are 6 small fixes that could have made Episode 7, The Force Awakens, a lot tighter and more satisfying. To me, anyway. Gigantic spoilers, obviously. And I'm not claiming these are all original thoughts. I'm sure many people have had similar ideas, and hell, I credit the first 2 to someone else, but these are things that I see after just a couple days, which seem like they could have been a relatively big improvement for relatively little change or effort. First, as Max Landis suggested on Screen Junkies, a couple lines of dialogue with another stormtrooper before that first battle would have set up Finn's actions, just set up his motivation a lot better. Just have another soldier ask him, "This your first deployment?" Finn nods, doesn't even have to talk yet. Just stick close to me, you'll be fine. Maybe Captain Phasma tells them to cut the chatter, probably over the comms. Then that trooper is the one who gets shot. Very simple, but now we have a much better understanding at the time, instead of after the fact, why this particular engagement might cause FN whatever to break his programming. 2. While we're crediting Max Landis for ideas, even though I'm sure this one was obvious to a lot of people, he had a good point that Phasma, Captain Phasma, who does dick all in the entire movie, should have been the one to fight Finn by the lake when he was using the lightsaber. Even though I like the idea of showing that individual soldiers would care and that they have anti-Jedi melee weapons and training, still, Phasma really needed more to do, and that would have been the time. Obviously, he wouldn't have killed her, but she could have been shot and survived. That armor has to stop a shot one of these times. Speaking of Phasma, number 3, instead of taking her out like an absolute chump when Finn tried to stick her up in the Death Star killer base, I would have loved to see her do a classic disarm move, taking the blaster and almost like turning it upon him, only for her to be knocked out by a big furry arm from off screen. I don't think that would diminish Finn's competence that much. Finn's generally pretty competent, and he's still going more on trying, because he's just competent enough. I don't think that would embarrass him too much that she did the disarm move. It'd just make her look cool, and then she gets smacked down by Chewie, because, obviously. Then, when they're trying to force her to help them, they should have taken her damned helmet off. Why would you leave the helmet on someone that you're trying to force to do something? It doesn't make any sense. Just pull the helmet off. And this would give the actress a chance to show her rage and loathing and indignity at the situation. I think with a good performance, even if she gave in the same way she did in the movie, I think she could have seemed less useless from it. Especially if she did beat up Finn down at the lake earlier. 4, throw in some B-Wings or something. Everyone knows Y-Wings suck, but it was a lost opportunity to use only X-Wings in their attack. Even in Episode 4, they had the concept of mixed forces, despite their time and budget limitations. Their bombing runs would have seemed more plausible with something like a pair of B-Wings to add firepower. Plus, when the TIEs took out the B-Wings and they had to adapt and just do what they could with the X-Wings they had left, it would have made the battle seem a little bit more textured, a little bit less samey all the way along, 5. When Chewbacca shot Kylo Ren, he should have fired 2 bolts. Kylo is hit by the first, just as we saw, but he has just enough time to raise his hand and freeze the second bolt in the air a couple feet ahead of him. Although it's possible that Chewie was trying not to kill Han's son, it's a little, you could read that into the movie, but still, this is Chewie. Wookiee rage, right? And more importantly, it makes both of them look more effective. Kylo obviously looks more badass because he stopped a freaking bowcaster bolt with the Force, but it also gives that one time that he did it earlier an actual dramatic payoff, instead of being a random one-off thing and then why doesn't he do that anymore? Meanwhile, Chewie's attack looks more effective, but it also provides a good reason for him to change targets. Now that Kylo's aware of the attack, it becomes apparent that shooting him more is probably a waste of time. 6, okay, here's the big one. this would be a more extensive change. It involves changing choreography and stuff. But the whole lightsaber battle at the end needed to be reworked somewhat, because I don't care that Kylo was injured, or how strong Rey is with the Force. He's a mostly trained dark Force user, and she has no lightsaber training whatsoever. It just would have greatly improved the movie and helped keep Rey from crossing the dreaded Mary Sue line if A, it was much more obvious that Kylo Ren was just toying with Finn, and B, if he was similarly toying with Rey, and then when she had her sort of Force moment, or whatever you call that, from then on she had just barely been able to hold her own. Okay, so here we go. In my version, Finn ignites the lightsaber, makes a couple of decent attacks. It's not that hard to, attack with a lightsaber, and he does have melee training. But after that, from then on, he's just desperately falling over himself to not die. Without training, and generally the Force, even if you get the lightsaber between you and your opponent's blade, there is a good chance every time you block that it will come back to you and chop something off. Now, Kylo's clearly screwing around with him, and he's hurt. But when he does manage to deflect a blow, Finn tries to put on a little bit of bravado. It's like, I've had hand-to-hand training. You should know. To which Kylo would respond, you think this is hand-to-hand? Send him flying with a Force push, and then just start dropping trees on him with his lightsaber, hacking them down. Finn, avoids one, then he uses the lightsaber to protect himself from the second, but, he doesn't have the Force. He doesn't have that Jedi reflexes, so, when he cuts the tree that's coming towards him, he still gets lightly lacerated by the branches as it falls around him. Now he's, looking pained and very unprepared when Kylo is, just streaks at him out of the sky, just, launched in the wake of the falling trees. So Flynn is, flailing as he falls and rolls away downhill, luckily manages to stop a death blow there, but Kylo just says, enough, disarms him with a wave of his hand, and then cuts Finn down, just as in the movie. Okay? Once Rey gets the lightsaber, he's toying with her too, but he's getting angrier as the fight goes on, and she's just barely hanging on. She has her breakthrough, and then from that point she's almost competently defending, using the Force for, knowledge and defense, even though she's not trained. She's doing her best, but she'd still be too hard-pressed by him to actually go back on the attack. She desperately hangs on just long enough to be saved by the world breaking up, right? So they get split apart by the chasm opening, and since in this version Kylo would still be standing, before he could just leap across the gap, because the Force, Chewie would pull up into Falcon and open up on him with the undership anti-personnel cannon. Kylo would be hard-pressed, deflecting the rapid blast with his lightsaber, even freezing a couple, but as the blasts push him back, he turns and just quickly sprints through the forest and out of range. And then probably have a scene where he gets picked up by General Hux or whoever with the shuttle later, because the timing of that in the movie, of being asked to do that, seemed really dubious in terms of having time to actually pick him up and still escape, but whatever. The end result is the same. Kylo was still wounded from the bowcaster earlier, and he still failed from his point of view, and probably gets a nick or two from Rey. But now he would seem much more intimidating to everyone else, and it would reduce the degree to which everything seems a little too easy for Rey, even for someone highly Force-sensitive. The villain being actually defeated by two people with no lightsaber training just makes no sense in universe, and it colors his performance throughout the rest of the movie. If he came out of the fight still looking very powerful and badass, then his self-doubt would be more of a character trait, rather than just reinforcing that he isn't very strong. Yet. Now, if only movie makers would ask me to proofread their final drafts for stuff like this. Seriously. If you want to nitpick some of my storytelling, under my own set of constraints, check out my illustrated video retelling of Tales from My D&D Campaign. And for dorky anime reviews with my sister Orestria, check out our Anime Indecision channel. The last review of 2015 is up, and it's head-to-head. Full Metal Alchemist. 2003 versus Brotherhood.